This AskReddit user asks, ex-friends of a serial killer, what were they like? Played D&D with a guy on deployment for a few months while I was in the Navy. We hung out in the same group of people. I stopped playing because he kept trying to rape all the female NPCs, player characters. When we got back from deployment, the FBI and NCIS were pierside waiting for him. Him and some other guys had raped and killed a woman whose husband was on deployment. Also had some friends who tied up an old man who they suspected of molesting one's younger brother when we were teenagers. They tortured him for hours. Then killed him and tried to burn the body. 2 got life. The other turned evidence and only served a few years. Had another guy, the first was pretty good friends with, get arrested by ATF for trying to blow up the car of our local ADA. He bought fake C4 from an undercover agent. They swarmed him while he was pushing the switch. As I write this, I realize I've been close to some really messed up people. Maybe I'm the one who isn't right. I always wonder how these groups of deranged serial killers get together. Like, do they just happen to meet and just feel each other out until they realize they're the same breed? Or do they go online and intentionally organize it all beforehand with other anonymous killers? Kildar. Kill it. I went to high school with not one, but 2 murderers. This was a suburban Atlanta high school. The biggest things, beside murdering a couple of people, they had in common is that they both had nuclear tempers and ran with the redneck crowd. He was so sweet. He was basically my childhood friend. Then one day I stopped hearing from him. 1 or 2 years later he called me and asked me out. I said yes and was so happy. I really did love him. On the way to the restaurant someone hit my car and I wasn't able to go. A week later, the day before I was supposed to meet him, he got arrested for having 3 bodies of prostitutes that had recently went missing, stored in his basement. All of them severely damaged and beaten. Was that a bullet you dodged? Or a nuclear warhead? A nuke. But not just any nuke. It was the GD Tsar Bomba. Oh Lord. Wasn't your time, friend. Not a serial killer. But I went to school with kids who wrote a kill list. I knew one of them pretty well and we were close. He would pass me snacks in class sometimes and check up on me when I was upset. Very caring. But he got RLLY on edge the week him and his friend planned to go through with their plan. He was less talkative and any time we talked he would tell me to be careful from now on and school isn't important RN. Even suggested I should miss school one time. He ended up dropping me altogether after I kept getting nosy. When I tried to talk to him for the first time in days he snapped on me. Once I found out what happened I pieced everything together. See you guys on TTS Reddit channel. Not serial killer, but allegedly a serial child molester. We were friends. He was always a little off compared to the other kids, but I thought we were really good friends for a while. This was when we were quite young. Thinking back though, sadly, I think he may have been abused himself in some way by his parents. I slept over one night and it was the weirdest experience. His dad came into the room for some reason and he made me hide in the closet and pretend not to be there. Nothing happened, but it was a big red flag. I'm projecting a lot off of that one weird experience. But that's what I remember. Other than that, he always lived in fear of his parents, but we really just thought they were strict. In high school he seemed like your overcompensating jock type, but nothing crazy or weird. We were okay friends then but drifted apart. Then like a lot of years later I was talking to my mom and she informed me that, oh yeah, blank got caught molesting a bunch of kids. It was pretty FD up. But sure enough it was in the paper. She showed me the clipping. Yeah, she's weird. Anyways, I have no idea if he ended up going to prison or whatever and didn't really want to know. It's just sad either way and I hope it really wasn't true. I slept over one night and it was the weirdest experience. His dad came into the room for some reason and he made me hide in the closet and pretend not to be there. Did his dad not know he had a friend over? This is super odd. Yeah, if I remember us having dinner with his mom, but his dad wasn't there for that. I'm thinking maybe he wasn't supposed to be home or something. Maybe he was protecting you from his dad. Was roommates with one. He was a cool guy. Serial killer in the sense that he was born in crime and killed multiple people in his career. He went to multiple prisons in multiple countries. He made a 180 and bettered his life in the way that he sits at home, watches TV all day and enjoys cooking. I was in a dark place during that time, and him being able to better his life was a huge motivation to change my life for the better. Cool guy. Last I heard he was still on the right path. I still think about him sometimes. Only wish him the best. Okay lol. What kind of career do you kill people? Drugs? Mafia? I feel like we need a little more info if you can give it without jeopardizing anyone. Does he have a different career now? Does he work? Chuckles in Hitman. I'm in career. Pro tip for these kinds of stories from people on the internet. The more details people are willing to give, the higher the chance the writer is full of st. Also not a literal career. He doesn't work anymore. He's in his 60s now. Serial is 3. The most I knew, confirmed, was 2 with an unborn child and dog. I went to school with this guy and he'd be at the bush parties on the weekends. He was really quiet and would just stare at the bonfire. My mother saw this fire and was wondering if a camp across the bay was burning down. It was intense. Nothing struck me as frighteningly unusual about him. I knew a few other guys who did random murders. In hindsight, they all seem to have a similarity about them. Link. My friend Dahmer was based on the graphic novel written by one of his buddies in high school. Pretty interesting flick. Haven't seen the movie, but the comic is really good. Almost makes you feel kind of sorry for Dahmer. He was like a big, goofy brother. I loved him to bits but fell out of contact with him when I split with my ex. Last year his ex, we were friends through him, sent me an article via FB Messenger detailing how he murdered his new wife and her 3 young kids, then set the trailer they were all living in on fire. The pictures of him in the article chilled me to the bone. The guy the first knew back then wasn't there. There was just a cold-blooded emptiness in his eyes. He's still waiting to be put on trial. My mom used to work with Dana Sue Gray and was friends with her. My mom didn't know her middle name was Sue until the murders. By the way, my mom really liked her, but she was very materialistic. Whenever I saw her, she was very friendly and would talk to me about Ren and Stimpy as I was 9 and obsessed the cartoon at the time. What was really weird was that we lived in a decent-sized city. But one of her victims that lived and later helped ID her, Dorinda Hawkins, was our next-door neighbor. There was no other connection she had to Dorinda, and she strangled her in a storefront downtown. Not a serial killer, but I went to school with the guy that murdered Chris Kyle, American Sniper, and Chad Littlefield. He was a pretty normal kid. Kinda funny. Had ADHD, I believe, and was in some of the academic assistance programs if I can remember right. Class clown type for the most part. Don't remember him getting into a bunch of fights or anything. Nothing specific really stands out. His mom was one of our teachers in elementary. He left school early and joined the military. Did a couple tours, including the Haitian disaster relief in the early 2010s. Apparently fishing bodies out of wreckage is what messed him up really bad. After that he had horrible PTSD and developed some bad mental health issues. Chris and Chad were doing arranged therapy business for veterans. Eddie snapped and murdered him for his truck, big modified diesel, and took off. Horrible story and outcome from someone who was once pretty normal. I knew him from 3rd grade or so until senior year. Not great friends or anything, but he seemed like a decent guy. We'd been out of school for about 10 years or so when it happened, so a lot changed over that time, I'm sure. That is insane. How did you react when seeing the news of it happening? The main thing the media does to killers that is weird is use their full name. So in the media, he was Eddie Ray Ruth to everyone. We only ever called him Eddie. I remember reading about it and then it going wild on all my hometown pages. We were a small hometown, so it was fairly tight-knit. Everyone was sharing stories and refuting things the media was saying. But also devastated because Chris Kyle is from the same area and is considered the biggest hero ever around there. Mostly I just did what we all did. Look for news articles and try to keep track of what was going on. You have the right to a 3-letter middle name. If you don't have a 3-letter middle name, one will be assigned to you. Quote, "The Dark Knight killer who shot up the theater in Colorado grew up right behind my aunt's house in San Diego. She would frequently babysit the kids in her neighborhood. This was mid-90s to early 2000s. I'd come over a lot to visit my cousins. There were always lots of kids over playing. Usually older than me, and he was one of them. He went to high school and college with my cousins as well, but I personally only ever met him as a very young child and I can't personally remember any interactions. My one cousin, however, did know him as a normal, extremely intelligent person, very interested in the brain and science. Come college he was so invested in his studies they grew apart and eventually moved away, cutting all contact. Wish I knew more or had more to say. All I remember is being in the backyard playing with the dogs by the pool, being rambunctious little ones, never thinking one day down the road that kid would dye his hair orange and be a murderer. He wasn't a serial killer, but a killer nonetheless. I grew up around him and his family. They were poor but were usually able to make ends meet. He was known to have previous drug addictions, and was overall a very weird guy. He was the type of guy that sent alarms off in your head when you're around him. I always tried to avoid him. He and his wife had 2 kids together, but they always had a very rocky marriage. She left him numerous times, but they always got back together. She ended up moving out of state to take care of an ill family member and left him. He showed up at their door insisting on talking to her, and she eventually let him in. They got into a very heated argument and he turned a gun on her and shot her, right in front of their young 2 kids. He tried to turn it on himself, but I believe the oldest wrestled it from him and held it until the cops showed up. It was an incredibly sad and sickening story. No one could believe he would do such a thing. Pretty cool janitor at our middle school. Would sometimes play Magic the Gathering with us when his lunch and our recess lined up. Was kinda surreal when they found several dead prostitutes in his attic a few years later. They were all over the house. The house stunk so bad the state police had to order better respirators to be able to stand working in there. After cleaning all day at school, the last thing serial killer janitor wanted to do was clean his place too. I don't know anyone that actually hurt someone, but an ex of mine confided in me he had fantasies of being a serial killer and went into great detail about what he wanted to do. Classic torture in the basement type stuff. I don't know why I wasn't afraid of him at the time. It didn't really hit me the weight of stuff he said until after we broke up. If it makes you feel any better, I had serious urges when I was younger and in a very dark place. I went to therapy and I haven't had any issues since I read my journal entries and scared the st out of myself. He might be alright now. I had urges like that when I was put on Zoloft. Never before and never again. But they were really bad when I was on it. That's good to hear. I'm hoping the same for him, but he also fully admitted to having narcissistic personality disorder. Underneath it all, I think he was a sweet boy though. Hopefully that part will be the survivor. Not a serial killer, but one of my best girlfriends in high school ended up murdering another girlfriend of hers in cold blood. Honestly, I wouldn't doubt it if she'd killed other people and never got caught for it. She was such a nice girl. Almost eerily too nice. Everyone else thought she was an angel, but I could definitely see through it. But she was so nice to me that I just went along with it and tried not to strike any nerves just in case. She was a model. Prettiest girl I knew and acted very caring towards everyone if they needed help. Let them stay at her house if they got kicked out, etc. She had a very short temper. Though. One time a kid threw an egg at her window and blamed me and some other guys. Ended up putting out a hit on us for it. They showed up at my buddy's house with guns and searched it. That's when I knew she was crazy. A year later she ended up strangling her friend to death with a belt and left her on the side of the road. Cops found out it was her because she had posted a Facebook pic the night before with the victim while wearing the belt they found with her body. I saw her in court accidentally about another year later. I was there for my own reasons. She was in hand and leg cuffs being escorted by multiple cops and struck up a conversation with me like everything was normal. OMG, hey girl. How have you been? Gave me the heebie-jeebies. But in a way I still miss her because she was so nice to be around. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos.